So I am just back from a beautiful week's holiday in Whitby, North Yorkshire. I went with my two youngest sons. I say that they are now 17 and 19, so not so young anymore. And we just had a week to explore Whitby and the Yorkshire moors and, you know, just to enjoy the dramatic nature of this small town that inspired Bram Stoker so many years ago. And whilst I was on holiday, I was reflecting on the holiday and my life, and it really made me think very deeply about the 8's in the Rider-Waite Smith deck. Before I move into that, one of the questions people often ask me is, when I go on holiday, do I take a tarot deck with me? And the answer is yes and no. This is the deck I take with me. It is a brand new sealed version of my reading deck. I don't like to travel without a tarot deck because there might be occasions when I really need that insightful advice. But I also need to take a break from tarot. So I have come to the tradition, if you like, of just keeping a sealed deck in my suitcase. And if I need it, it's there. I don't take a rune set for the very simple reason that the runes are so easy to draw that if I needed a rune reading, I would simply write them on a bit of paper, put them in a sandwich box and do a rune reading that way. In fact, one of the most powerful rune readings I ever had was when a friend was visiting me. And I said to him, "You've bought your rune set, right? I want a reading." And he sort of looked at me and went, "No." And so he proceeded to take a sheet of A4 paper, a Sharpie pen, and a sandwich bag, write the runes out, tear them up, put them in the bag, and give me an incredibly powerful reading. Because I believe that when we do either a tarot reading or a rune reading, the real magic happens with us. This is the deck I love, whether it's my perhaps overused deck or my deck in waiting, if you like, ready to go. It's the deck I love most, and it's the deck I'm most familiar with. But it's me that does the magic when I'm reading. And likewise, if you are reading with runes or tarot, it is your understanding, your knowledge, your wisdom, your intuitive connection that allows the magic to flow. So often if I'm walking, and we did a lot of walking, and I did a lot of walking on my own as well, often when I'm walking, I reflect on the world using tarot images and rune wisdom in a daydreamy, cupsy, intuitive kind of way. It just helps me, I guess, to structure my thoughts. And on one of my walks, I was really thinking about how often my life does feel like a blend of these two cards. I do suffer for numerous reasons that I'm not going to go into at this point, from self-limiting beliefs. I definitely sit with that imposter syndrome. I tend to say I'd rather have imposter syndrome than a God complex, but it's a bit of a joke that hides the truth. I really do suffer from low self-esteem. And I spend a lot of my hours working, partly because I have high bills to pay, partly because I'm not prepared to just do client hours. That's what pays the bills. But it's not enough for me. I want to teach, I want to create content, and I want to keep learning. So I almost think of my business as a two-tier structure, where my client hours pays the bills, and my content creation, my writing, being present here, they are how I keep learning. Because I think both tarot and runes are a lifetime journey. So I often feel like these two cards really reflect who I am professionally. And I've been working a lot recently with strength, which of course is another 8. And I've been really using strength to try and ease a better balance between these two. I love the strength card. When I look at this, I think the lion represents often the parts of ourselves that we don't like. We might call that the shadow. We might call it the things that we project onto others. And to me, a huge part of strength is about being kind to ourselves and knowing that in any one moment, you are always good enough. And I've really been trying to sit with this. And very much like the YouTube channel here, I would love to commit to doing 2 videos a week. But if you've been following me, I go through periods where my life allows that. But I've also come to the point of strength where I don't make myself do it. And the reason I'm recording this today, which is Tuesday, is because I've actually decided to go camping for 2 nights at the weekend. And I normally do the videos at the weekend. And I've decided that I'm not going to beat myself up about sticking to a schedule. I'm just going to record what feels right and know that it will be good enough. And then when I was thinking about this, and I wasn't so much thinking about YouTube, obviously that's sparked by the fact that I'm recording a video. I was just thinking about so often when we are focused and we are sitting with imposter syndrome, what we create is usually more than good enough. And I was really sitting with that. And then as I was delightfully at that point walking across the North Yorkshire coast path, it really made me think of all the 8's. And it made me think of the 8 of Cups. Now, I know that people often think about the 8 of Cups as moving on. And I can understand why. But to me, that's a part meaning of this card. If we look at this card, what we have is we have an eclipse. What we have is somebody with red boots and a red cloak and the same golden staff that the hermit has, clearly walking to a place of higher perspective. I often think with the 8 of Cups, this is when we take a break, whether it's for an hour or a 20-minute walk or a week away. It's when we take a break to allow ourselves to see a situation or our life from a better perspective. And in fact, one of the reasons I'm going camping this weekend is my long runic shamanic course is winding up in the next couple of months. And I want to pause and reflect how I would like to teach next. I've been teaching tarot and shamanics for the last 15 years, and I like to mix it up. I like to teach in different ways. So for me, going to Whitby, going camping in a couple of nights' time, it allows me to see my life from a better perspective. And there are so many meanings for the 8 of Wands. But one meaning that will always stick in my mind, I was reading at a tarot fair in Brighton. I'd read for one woman, and the 8 of Wands was a key card in her reading. And it just didn't fit with the rest of the reading. Now, that happens. It happens to me a fair amount that, one card just doesn't fit the narrative. So I note it, and I think, well, if I need to know what it's going to say, it will come back, and it will make itself clear. So the reading ended and I said, it's been interesting with the 8 of Wands. It doesn't seem to have fitted with the rest of the reading. And I made a few suggestions. I said it might mean that travel is on your mind, or maybe even that you've travelled quite a way to be here. And the reading ended and the next lady moved forward. I shuffled, I cut, I lay the cards out, and the 8 of Wands was the first card. I carried on with her reading, and just like the previous lady, the reading was smooth, the cards connected, but the 8 of Wands just seemed to stand apart from the reading. And I said to her, I said, it's really strange. I said, the lady before you had the Eight of Wands, and it just didn't seem to fit in her reading. And I said, I'm getting a very similar vibe for you. I said, I'm just going to suggest that maybe, maybe travel is important to you, or that you could think about traveling. And she looked at me and she said, well, the funny thing is, the lady that you read for before me is my friend. We both live in Brighton, but we met when we were traveling in New Zealand. And it's always stayed with me. One of those weird little nuances that they both had this card of travel, because it can mean lots of things. But if you get these two together, it usually means a journey, a trip, to be able to look at life from a different perspective. Because these two together can mean that you are perhaps a bit stuck in student mode, or that maybe you're overworking to try and release yourself from self-limiting blocks. And the advice for me for all of the eights together is, remember that as long as you've put the effort in, then whatever you achieve is good enough. And that being kind to ourselves is always the right choice.